ASRAR-I-KHUDI, showing that the system of the universe originates in the self, and that the continuation of the life of all individuals dependent on strengthening the self. Showing that the life of the self comes from forming desires and bringing them to birth. Showing that the self is strengthened by love. Showing that the self is weakened by asking. Showing when the self is strengthened by love, it gains dominion over the outward and inward forces of the universe. Showing that the education of the self has three stages: obedience, self-control, and divine besegerance. The story of a young man who came to Saint Ali Hajwari and complained that he was oppressed by the enemies. A story of the bird that was faint with thirst. A story of the diamond and the coal. A story of Sheikh and Brahman, followed by a conversation between Ganges and Himalaya to the effect of the continuation of social life, showing that the purpose of Muslim life is to exalt the word of Allah. The ASRAR-I-KHUDI was first published at Lahore in 1915. I read it soon afterward and thought so highly of it that I wrote to Iqbal, whom I had the pleasure of meeting at Cambridge some 15 years ago, asking leave to prepare an English translation. His ideas is not for the Mohammedans of India alone, but for Muslims everywhere. This capacity depends ultimately on the conviction that Khudi, selfhood, individuality, personality is real and is not merely an illusion of the mind. In Iqbal's opinion of the decay prevailing in Islam, and argues that only by self-affirmation, self-expression, and self-development the decay can stop. Iqbal's criticism of Hafiz called forth angry protest from Sufi circles. Iqbal cancelled it in the second edition of the poem. It was omitted in my translation too. The moral and religious ideal of man is not self-negation, but self-affirmation. And he attains to the ideals by becoming more and more individual, more and more unique. What then is life? It is individual, its highest form. So far is the ego, Khudi, in which the individual becomes a self-contained exclusive center. The greater his distance from God, the less his individuality. He who comes nearest to God is the completest person. Not that he is finally absorbed in God. On the contrary, he absorbs God into himself. After death, there may be an interval of relaxation, as the Quran speaks of a barzakh or intermediate state, which lasts until the day of resurrection. Although life abhors repetition in its evaluation, yet on Bargasa principle, the resurrection of the body too, as Wilden Carr says, is quite possible. On its first appearance, the ASRAR-I-KHUDI took by storm the young generation of Indian Muslims. Iqbal wrote, one of them has caught amongst us as a Masiha and has stirred the death with life. How far the influence of his work may ultimately go, I will not attempt to prophesy. It has been said of him that he is a man of his age and a man in advance of his age. Iqbal is also a man in disagreement with his age. My flood requires whole sea to hold it. Arise and pour wine into the cup and sprinkle the dry herbs with my tears. The silence was filled with my cries to God. I was complaining of the sorrows of the world. Up and re-inspire every living soul and gain knowledge of the nature of the universe and extract the secret of life's constitution. It harvested 100 poets like Rumi and Attar. I am of India. Persian is not my native tongue. Do not seek from me charm of style in exposition. Although the language of Hind is sweet as sugar, yet sweeter is the fashion of Persian speech. showing that the system of the universe originates in the self and that the continuation of the life of all individuals depends on strengthening the self. When the self awoke to consciousness, it revealed the universe. The self rises, kindles, falls, glows, breathes. Power that is expressed and inert change the faculties which leads to action. Life is in proportion to this power. When life gathers strength from the self, the river of life expands into an ocean. Life is preserved by purpose. Because of the goal, its caravan bell tinkles. Keep desires alive in the heart. From the flame of desire, the heart takes life. Negation of desire is death to the living. The object of science and art is not knowledge. Science is an instrument for the preservation of life. Science and art are servants of life. We live by forming ideals. We glow with the sunbeams of desire, showing that the self or khudi is strengthened by love. Love instructs it to eliminate the world. Love fears neither sword nor dagger. Love is the fountain of life. Love is the flashing sword of death. Love of God, and last becomes holy God. Secrets of self. He instituted new laws in the world. He sat with his slave at one table. Like Umar, come down from thy camel. Seek not thy daily bread from the bounty of other. Seek not water from the fountain of the sun. Be a man of honor and like the bubble. Keep the cup inverted ever in the midst of the sea. Showing that when the self is strengthened by love, it gains dominion over the outward and inward forces of the universe. When the self is made strong by love, its power rules the whole world. Its hand becomes God's hand. The moon is split by its fingers. The tiger tribe was exhausted by hard struggles. They had set their hearts on enjoyment of luxury. In their stupidity, they swallowed the charm of the sheep. He that used to make sheep his prey now embrace a sheep's religion. They lost the power of ruling and the resolution to be independent. They lost reputation, prestige and fortune. Their paws that were as iron become strengthless. Their souls died and their bodies become tombs. Bodily strength diminished while spiritual fear increased. Spiritual fear robbed them of courage. Lack of courage produced 100 diseases. The wakeful tiger was lulled to slumber by the sheep's charm. He called his decline moral culture. He was so fascinated by the invisible that he made hand, eye, and ear of no account. To die, said he, is the secret of life. He dominates our thinking. His cup sends us to sleep and takes the sensible world away from us. He is a sheep in men's clothing. The soul of the Sufi boasts to his authority. Its seed does not desire to grow. Life is occupied with conquest alone, and the one charm for conquest is desire. Life is the hunter, and desire the snare. Desire is love's message to beauty. Obedience, service, and toil are traits of the camel. Patience and perseverance are ways of the camel. He eats seldom, sleeps little, and is inured to toil. He carries rider, baggage, and litter, rejoicing in his speed, more patient in travel than his rider. By obedience, the man of no worth is made worthy. The star moves towards its goal. The grass springs up in obedience to the law of growth. Don't complain of the hardness of the law. Self-control. Thy soul cares only for itself like the camel. In the Muslim's hand, prayer is like a dagger. He executes the command of Allah in the world. He wakes and sleeps for God alone. He gives a new explanation of life, a new interpretation of Ali is the first Muslim and the king of man. In love's eyes, Ali is the treasure of the faith. Devotion to his family inspires me with life. The apostle of God gave him the name of Bhutarab. Here the might of Khaybar is under his feet. How long this wailing and crying and lamentation? The pith of life is contained in action. The delight is creation, is the law of life. Arise and create a new world. The man of a strong character who is master of himself. He will dig up the foundations of his own strength. He will produce a new world which will do his pleasure. The potentialities of man of action. Life has only one law, and its mainspring is the desire for victory. Gain knowledge of life mysteries. Be without fear of others. Why be angry with mighty men? Why complain of enemies? I will declare the truth. Thine enemy is thy friend. He awakens its potentialities. What is the use of eating and sleeping like a beast? What is the use of being unless thou have strength in thyself? Abide in self like Joseph. Advance from captivity to empire. Think of self and be a man of action. A story of the bird that was faint with thirst. A bird was faint with thirst. He saw a diamond in the garden. Thirst created a vision of water. Deceived by the sun-bright stone, the foolish bird fancies that it was water. He got no moisture from the gem. He pecked it with his beak, but it did not wet his palate. But I am not a dewdrop. I give no drink. I don't live for the sake of others. Be a diamond, not a dewdrop. Be massive in nature like mountains. Story of the diamond and the coal. Now I will open one more gate of truth. The coal is the mind, said the diamond. We are comrades and our being is one. The source of our existence is the same. Thou art set on the crowns of emperor. My stuff is so vile that I am valued less than earth. Everyone puts the sole of his foot on my head. My fate must needs to be deplored. Oh, sagacious friend, said the diamond, dark earth, when hardened, becomes indignity as a basil. Because thy body is soft, thou art burnt. Be void of fear, grief and anxiety. Be hard as a stone. Be a diamond. Whoever strives hard and grips tight, the two worlds are illuminated by him. Weakness is worthlessness and immaturity. Do not abandon self, persist therein. Make self strong and thou wilt endure. The spiritual fire burned the intellectual stack. The Maulvi, being a stranger to love's miracle, which had burned the books of the philosophers. My state is beyond thy thought. The Muslim's knowledge is perfected by spiritual fervor. Love is the plateau that heals the sickness of the mind. Life is one of time's mysteries. We are oft complaining of destiny. Give us the sleepless eye and the passion heart. We are dispersed like stars in the world. Teach myself to weep like that candle. I have nourished a flame in my bosom. The breast of this age is without a heart. It is not easy for the candle to throb alone. Ah, is there no moth worthy of me? How long shall I wait for one to share my grief? How long must I search for a confidant? Withdraw thy fire from the soul. Take back what thou hast put in my breast, or give me one old comrade to be the mirror of mine all-burning love, that I may confide my lament to his soul and see again my face in his heart. His image I will mold of mine own clay. I will be to him both idol and worshipper.